So, as I was saying, we have learned chapters 1 through 5 last year, and we did spend time on anti Semitism in Megillat Esther, but not only. We also did learning about it because you don't only have to learn about anti Semitism, there's so much more in Megillat Esther. And we will finish it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, where 10 is a very short perek, but let's see what I find. You never know. And then when we finish that, we will move to a new topic, which we don't have to decide now, but I would love to hear people's thoughts. I had ideas, for example, Pirkei Avot could be a nice, that people familiar with Pirkei Avot, that that brings interesting conversation, or a commentary on the Parsha is an option, which I know other people are giving as well. And I would be happy to hear people's thoughts. We've done a few different things. We've done Gemara stories, which I love. We've done Megillot. We did Kohelet. And we did Ruth. We've done Haftorah, just to remind you of what we've done. And I would be delighted to branch into something else. I've given a couple of ideas. Happy to bring suggestions for which commentary as well. If we want to do Parsha, I know Rav Stephen's also giving a Parsha class. And actually the book that he chose is one that I would consider as well, but he's already doing it on Zoom on Monday night, so I encourage you to attend that. We don't both have to give on the same, but he's great. The commentary, Reb Amnon Bazak. We could do, I also thought of doing maybe favorite Tehillim, favorite Psalms, like the 7 Psalms of the week. Oh, you like that? Karen's like, yay! Because I've never learned them. We could be Mizmor LeDavid, right? The one that we say, we do on Shabbat. It could be Baruchi Nafshi, which we do on Rosh Chodesh. It could be the Mizmorei Tehillim we've been saying now when we pray since October 7th. That's another idea which I had to do, to pick and choose the more well-known Psalms and to learn them together. Rabbi Elchanan Samet is an amazing commentator on that. So that would be an idea that probably would carry us through the second half of this year. So I have one vote yes for that. Very emphatic. And I'm also excited about doing that because I myself have not spent the time. So threw out some ideas. We will revisit these ideas in December or whenever it is. But I'm not sure how long it'll take us to get through the rest of Megillat Esther. Okay? Okay, let's start. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 of Megillat Esther. That's actually my favorite chapter, which I'll tell you why when we get to the middle, but it's also the first chapter that I learned to lane. And I kind of know it by heart, but let me sing it to you. And this will remind you. Does anybody remember where we left off? Just say it. Anybody remember? End of chapter 5? Nah, who remembers? I also didn't remember till I looked it up. The end of chapter 5 was when Haman comes back to Zeresh, V'chol Ohavav, all the people who love him, and he says to them, the queen picked me, just me, to come with Achashverosh and to have a party. This feels so amazing. I'm second to the king. V'chol zeh einenu shoveh li, and none of this means anything to me when I see Mordechai not bowing to me, right? He had this tremendous personal, the fact that could take away all of his joy. I mean, he's so powerful, but one man is not offering him the kavod, the honor that he feels he deserves. By the way, one of the commentaries said this also shows us about human nature, that when one is used to getting kavod, to getting honor, and it's magnified, I agree, it's magnified by Haman, but how that can change you and turn you into a person who always wants kavod, honor, and cannot necessarily be willing to share that honor with other people. How having negative traits, or even a trait that might seem positive, when it's taken to an extreme, it can actually change you into someone where it creates midot ra'ot, bad attributes. Everybody get that? The fact that he found it so painful that it just ruined everything in his life. And what does Zeresh suggest for him? She had a suggestion. Anybody remember what was the suggestion that Haman do about Mordechai?
Oh, build the gallows.
Build the gallows. Thank you. 50 meters high. So it's gavoa 50 ama. And then in the morning, by the way, she says to do it in the morning. Does Haman do this in the morning? Go to the king in the morning to ask him to hang Mordecai? That everything happens at night. It reminds me of that song. What is that song? About found a peanut last night. Found a peanut, found a peanut, found a peanut last night. Broke it open. Everything was last night. Last night, last night, last night, right? Went to heaven, da da da. It was rotten, whatever. Everything was last night. So if we remember, a lot of things are going to happen during that fateful night. And in fact, the Gemara, maybe the Targum Sheni, which translates it into Aramaic. And remember, every time you translate something into another language, what is it also? It's also a commentary. Because when you're translating something to another language, you have to choose what the meaning is that you choose, right? Not in Hebrew, or in any language, I guess, but certainly in Hebrew. Different words, different phrases can have different meanings. Like, we have a word in this chapter, nitchaf. Now, that Haman, after leading Mordechai and the horse, nitchaf el beito. So, litchof, anybody know what that means? Litchof?
Bush?
Litchof means to push. But what does dachuf mean? Mashu dachuf. Anybody know? Yes, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm thinking like an emergency, like
Urgent. Urgent.
urgent,
So
yeah.
it's the same word, but it's dachuf is this is urgent. Nitchaf is pushed. So when you translate that into another language, would you translate that Haman urgently went home or was kind of pushed home, whatever that means? Do you see what I mean? That when you translate something into another language, especially Hebrew, because remember I've said a few times, sorry, I lost my voice actually on Simchat Torah, I came back, but not completely, that when you translate something into another language, you're also giving a commentary because you choose of the, let's say, 3 or 4 different ways you could translate something. And you might have seen that in Hebrew, where it says this is the translation, but in parentheses it says literally this word. Anybody ever seen that when you see a commentary? So the Targum Sheni, which translated into Aramaic, is also a commentary and says, no, I can't remember what I was talking about that nitchaf, but I was going to say, what did the Targum Sheni say about coming in the middle of the night? I can't remember. I'll get back. I'll remember it again as we go along. I can't remember. I was talking about building it and coming in the middle of the night.
And then you were also talking about the word nidchav.
Right, no, I get that, but that was just an example of how something is translated. But anyway, I heard a commentary which used the Targum Sheni a lot. That was the spoken language at the time, and it's hard to translate it if you don't know Aramaic. But he used it, so I will bring that up as we go along, and I am sure that I will remember more things as we go along. So I'm sorry that I can't remember what I did, but what I said. But what happens at the end of chapter 5 is that he builds the tree, the gallows, 50 meters high, which is interesting, also saying he built it, which is not something that a minister would usually do. So, whether you say he had it ordered to be done, but that's not what the language is. The language is that he was willing to build it because he had such hatred against and such animosity towards Mordechai. So now it's the night, and we know that Esther has, what has she done? She's invited who? People can unmute, it's fine. Who was she invited?
Didn't she invite Mordechai to the party?
Nope, not Mordechai.
No, I meant Haman.
And who else? Achashverosh. Judy, you could put on your camera if you'd like. Achashverosh and Haman, as Ellen is pointing out. Yeah, but we want to see you, not your papers.
Done.
And this is for the, yeah, go on, Carol. What?
Oh,
You said something.
No, it's Mordecai, it's Achashverosh and Haman that she invites to the banquet.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you heard that. Ellen said that. So Achashverosh and Haman, and she's already invited them for the second one. Okay. So now we're going. The midrashim, the commentaries are going to imagine what was Achashverosh thinking. But here's the beginning of this chapter. B'halayla hu nadida shenat hamelech. Now, when I say hamelech, does that remind anybody of anything?
In the Yontif davening
Not
Right.
Yontif,
for Shabbos,
not Shabbos. Keep going. Try.
Yom Kippur
Yes, and
and Rosh Hashanah, right?
exactly. Thank you. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we sing. So you have to get there earlier because it's right before Baruch Hu, so it's early in the davening. The Chazan says Hamelech. What does that mean?
The King Hashem.
The king. But when we sing it in that voice, and that you're supposed to sing it that way, the person leading, even a person who doesn't do voices and doesn't do tunes, should still do Hamelech. And what does this hint to us? That which king is this? God. Now there is an understanding that when it says Hamelech Achashverosh in the Megillah, the king Achashverosh, it's talking about Achashverosh. But when it just says Hamelech, it's really talking about God, but it's God's name is then hidden behind the king. Because on the Pshat level, what is Pshat? The simple reading? It's Achashverosh. But on the Drash level, that whenever it says just Hamelech, it's actually talking about God. So it would be so interesting, wouldn't it, to go back to the beginning of the Megillah, look for every single place that it says Hamelech Achashverosh, and all the places that it just says Hamelech, and see where that connects to Achashverosh or to God. Wouldn't that be a cool way to do it? I don't think we're going to do it, because that feels like, but maybe sometime we'll do it, that we'll go through the whole Megillah again. Just to, maybe that would be a one-off. That would be kind of cool. Yeah, Ruby has something to say.
Whenever Hamelech was said and before Hashverosh, he thought they were always referring to him.
Who is he thought?
Hashverosh.
Well, Ruby, it's funny it's interesting that you say he thought.
He
Somebody wrote this down.
Oh,
It's the person who wrote it, the narrator, meaning probably Esther and Mordechai, because it says they wrote it.
Okay.
So they again, according to this interpretation, remember this is midrashic, right? Because it's not in the pshat of the text. It doesn't say God. Does it say God anywhere in the Megillah? It does not say God anywhere in the Megillah. But this is a way our sages reinterpreted it to say God's in there, but God's hidden. God is hidden behind the places where it says Hamelech. Now, Ruby, it's always referring to Achashverosh. But what this midrashic interpretation is telling us is that in addition to referring to Achashverosh, when it says just Hamelech, it's also God, and it's really about God, right? That's the way. Again, this is a midrashic interpretation. I just want to remind everybody, but I love it. So here is what it says: Balayla hahu, on that night. Which night is this? The same night that Esther invited. I guess I don't know what time it was. If this was the middle of the night, that I can't answer. And when she had the party, I would imagine the party should have been at night, but it sounds like the party was in the morning, because when Mordechai comes back from walking. When Haman comes back from walking Mordechai and the horse, we all know the story, that's when the courtiers, how do you pronounce? Courtiers? Courtiers? The courtiers of the king's palace are coming to rush him to bring him to the party. So that kind of sounds like the party was in the morning. So I don't know. They used to drink alcohol in the morning. But anyway, on that night, the night that Haman built the gallows, the night in between the first and second party, Nadidasha Nat Hamelech. Sleep deserted the king, or Nadida is like a nadneda is a swing. Nadned is a seesaw. So the king's sleep was disturbed because, I don't know if I would have said deserted, but right, he wakes up, he falls asleep, he wakes up. Okay. And the next word is, let's go back to God. So there are many who say, the Gemara, this Targum Sheni say, that after the 3 days of fasting, remember the 3 days of fasting? Esther had the whole Jewish people fasting, remember that? That there were 12,000 priests who came together and they blew trumpets and the whole of Israel fasted and they were all together, pulling together as one nation, that finally, as if disturbed God from God's sleep, as if woke up God. And this is the turning point. I don't know if you remember when I said that I felt there was a turning point, it's not just me, but in Esther's life, when it says that she donned royalties. Everybody remember when I said that? Vatilbash Esther Malchut. That Esther donned not clothes of royalty, but royalty, meaning she became a queen from the inside out, and from that moment on, she stopped being passive and started being active. Here, according to many, is the crux, the turning point of the Megillah, when things, speaking of seesaw, start to tilt in the Jews' favor, as if God woke up and said, okay, they really are sorry for whatever it was they did wrong, and they gathered together as one people. This wakes up God, and from now on, things start to turn for the better. So that's the Shnat HaMelech, the sleep of the king, meaning the king God. But back to Achashverosh, back to our regularly scheduled story. Hi, Alice. Vayomer, and Achashverosh said, Lahavi et Sefer HaZichronot, Divrei Yamim, to bring the book of Chronicles, the book of memories, Vayu Nikraim B'fnei Melech, and they would be read in front of the king, which is interesting. He's speaking in third person about himself. Maybe that's a royalty thing, but there are other ways to understand it. But wait, I have a lot to say here. First of all, somebody pointed out that, remember at his party, he asked that Vashti be brought. It says, Lahavi et Vashti Malka. To bring Vashti. To me, it sounds like it's repeating, this is a royal edict. This is a royal command. That person should be brought. That book should be brought. Okay. Now, one second. All right. There's a story here, a midrash, that I want to share with you. Maybe we won't finish chapter 6 today. This midrash is imagining what was Achashverosh feeling. Why was Achashverosh's sleep so disturbed? So let's remember what happened till now. What happened, well, according to this midrash, he had a nightmare. Achashverosh had a nightmare, and because otherwise, you could say it was a miracle that God caused his sleep to be disturbed. That's certainly one way of understanding it. That he had a nightmare that somebody tried to kill him. And you know how you wake up from a nightmare that's happened to probably all of us, kind of with your heart racing and maybe in a little bit of a sweat or a figurative sweat. And it's a little hard sometimes to let that fear dissipate. Like you have to sometimes sort of calm yourself down. People familiar with that feeling? Does that ring a bell?
Mm-hmm.
And so the midrash was the Targum Sheni, but again, we said that's a midrash. The fear remains with him, and because the fear remains with him, he started thinking, well, who could be trying to kill me? So what does he know? Think about it. He knows that Esther was willing to risk her life. Remember what, if she appears in the king's throne room without being invited, what can happen? Right, he just has to go like this, and they ram their spears, and according to the midrashim, they lifted their spears to ram into her, and then the king sees her so beautiful and says, oh, what would you like, and beckons her in. He says, one second, she's willing to risk her life, but not just to speak to me, she also invited Haman. And his mind continues, and he's like, why would she be inviting Haman? She must be having an affair with Haman. So they're in cahoots together. But then he says, why didn't anybody tell me? It couldn't be that nobody knew. Can't be. It's impossible to hide something like that. So maybe in the past, somebody protected me in some way or exposed some plot, and I didn't reward them. So people are like, well, what's the point of saving the king if he doesn't appreciate it and reward, let me see if that really happened. I mean, again, the Midrash is trying to explain the events why did he ask for the book of Chronicles? There's no reason. But if you think, well, he's trying to find out, maybe he wants to find that one time that somebody exposed a plot. And we know what that was, right? What was the time that somebody exposed the plot to kill him? What was that? Remember? Who did it? Who exposed it? I'm giving my voice a rest.
Didn't Mordecai find out about, was it Harvona?
No, Charvona's the good guy. The
Right.
Gam Charvona Zachor Latov.
Right. So who was it?
Remember their names?
No,
Bigtan Vateresh.
right.
Bigtan and Teresh were sitting in the gate of the king. They were speaking in some dialect, which they thought nobody understood. But Mordechai, because he was on the Sanhedrin, they had to know 70 languages. He understood. They were plotting to kill the king. Remember this?
Yes.
No? First chapter? No. Okay, doesn't matter. Or I think it was the first chapter, might have been the second. And he exposes it to the king. They write it down, but he never rewards him. He forgot about it. Okay? I just want to say that my cousins, they're called Shomrei Hasaf, the guards of the entrance. A saf is a threshold. So Bigtan and Teresh were the guards that were guarding stepping into the king's premises. So my cousins once dressed up like with turbans and as if they were Persian, and they created a frame, a door frame, and they walked around with it like they were Bigtan and Teresh on Purim. Like that was their costume. They walked around with this door frame saying, "We're Bigtan and Teresh. We're the guardians of the threshold." But they actually took the threshold with them. It was a very, very clever costume, which we all appreciated. Been many years, but it was like 50 years ago, but it was very cute. So, okay, so what happens now? He calls for the book to be brought so that he can look back and see, did somebody once expose the plot and I didn't reward that person? Everybody with me so far? And the next words are vayimatzeh, it was found, katuv, that it was written. What? The story about Mordechai. Okay. So again, this is a medrash that he called for Shimshi. I don't know where he got that name from. A shamash is a beetle. Is that what you call it? A shamus, right? Like you have it. What is that called? Like the gabbai who serves
Caretaker.
Caretaker, l'shamesh, right. So Shimshi would be a play on that word, that this guy was the person who served him. The shamash is the guy who, make sure the Sefer Torahs are covered properly. That's what I do in my shul, but whatever. Or make sure that the Siddur, takes care of things. So he calls for Shimshi, and according to this Midrash, Shimshi hated the Jews, right? This is where anti-Semitism is hidden. And when Mordechai, it's really cool, when Mordechai, he had to write down the story that Mordechai saved the king. And he erased it immediately. But the angel Gabriel came and rewrote it. That's why it says, Vayimatzeh, it was found, written. He's like, what? I erased this. Because the Midrash, you could say, oh, it's just making that up. Yes. But the reason it's making it up is because it doesn't say what it should have said. It's a very odd way of writing it. Vayimatzeh, and it was found, katuv, because Shimshi is like, that can't happen. So he quickly turns the page, and the angel turns the page back, and he quickly turns the page, and finally the king says, enough. Read wherever you are. And he finds Asher Higid Mordechai, that Mordechai said, Al Bigtana Vateresh. On Bigtana Vateresh, by the way, this is a strange way of writing it. There's an extra aleph. I don't know if I need to go into it. There's a midrash on that too. Shnei Sarisei HaMelech, two of the eunuchs of the king, the ones who serve the king. Mishomerei Hasaf, from those who watch the threshold. Asher Bikshu Lishloach Yad B'Melech Achashverosh, who had desired to send their hand, which is a way of saying to kill the king. Okay, everybody with me so far? Got it? Does it make sense? Anything about this midrash? Okay. So Vayomer HaMelech, the king asks, now again, the reason that Shimshi comes in, you're going to hear this in a second, what has been done for Mordechai about this, right? Remember, if you imagine that he's worried that he didn't pay somebody back for for telling on somebody else, for exposing a plot. So immediately says, oh, there we go. Mordechai, I remember. What did we do for him? Did we repay him? I mean, you should repay somebody like that. What is being done? Who answers him? Not the person who was reading it. Why didn't the scribe, the person who was reading it, or if it's a scribe or whatever? Rather, Na'arei HaMelech answered. Those kids, the servants of the king who happened to be around, in plural, not the person who was reading it. That's where the Midrash gets that it must have been one person who hated the Jews. He didn't want to tell Achashverosh, you forgot to reward him. Is everybody with me? I'm trying to explain why the Midrash comes up with these stories. Okay. So Achashverosh, okay, he tells the king the story. One second. So remember what Achashverosh was being paranoid is saying, oh, so that makes sense. Mordechai should have known about it because if we look back on the first chapter, hold on one second. Just a minute. I want to tell you something else. No, it's not there. Where is it about Big Ten Bateresh? Who remembers? Oh, it has to be in Perek Bet, of course. Okay. If we go back to chapter 2, and where it says that Mordechai found out about Big Ten and Teresh, it says, Vayaged le'Esther HaMalka. He told Esther, and Esther told the king. And then it says it was written in the book of Chronicles. So Achashverosh knows that Mordechai and Esther somehow have a connection. So he assumes that Mordechai must know about the affair between Haman and Esther. And the reason Mordechai didn't tell him is not a trick question. I set it up. Because he never rewarded Mordechai. But do you see how all the pieces fall together and hold together as a coherent story? I mean, I understand it's a medrash, but it is a cogent story that is based on the words in the text. Okay. Now what happens? What happens right then after they said to him, anybody have anything to say about this, by the way? I'm on verse 3. Yeah.
Question.
I'm eating an apple. Yeah.
Question. I don't have the Megillah with me, so I don't know. When it says Hamelach, all these things that he's been doing, does it say Hamelach Achashverosh or just Hamelach, like you were distinguishing before?
No, the first pasuk says Hamelech. Afterwards it's, no, you see, so sometimes it says Hamelech Achashverosh and sometimes it says Hamelech. So you'd have to look inside, but I don't want to go into all of the instances. I just wanted to take that one. I think a one-off shiur would be really cool to differentiate between Melech and Melech HaChashverosh. I just don't want to go into it now. But you should bring a text with you. It's always good. Bring a Tanakh, anything. Or a Megillah. You must have a Megillah somewhere in your home, Judy, no? Okay. Oh, ladies, I didn't bring you either. I'm sorry. We have Tanachim right here. Do you want me to bring you? No, you're okay? Oh, they're fine without it. Okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, so write the next sentence. 1 second. Okay, that's not important. Sorry, I'm reading one of the midrashim I wrote, but I don't think it adds that much. What happens? What's happening at the same time that the king discovered that? Again, going a little bit on this midrash, but the king discovered Mordechai was never paid back and is still imagining that Haman and Esther are in cahoots with each other, whether they're having an affair or they're just good buddies. I don't know. He doesn't know yet. Remember, he doesn't know yet that Esther is a Jew. He doesn't know this yet. This is very important. Who appears? Vayomer HaMelech mi v'chatzer. The king says, who's in the court, who's waiting outside? He hears rustling. He sees somebody is there. Who came? Who came to speak to the king?
Wasn't it Esther?
Nope. Esther is not there. Haman. Haman, the same Haman who built the gallows. He's coming, feels a little dumb, to wake up the king in the middle of the night and to tell him, can we hang Mordechai? but really bad timing because the king just discovered that Mordechai was a loyal subject and actually saved him from being killed. So whether you say that's, a miracle or just Haman being blinded by his own hatred of Mordechai, that he wants to do it as soon as he can. Okay. Vehaman ba, and Haman had come lachatzar beit hamelech, to the courtyard of the king, lemor lamelech, to tell the king. By the way, all of these, Judy, are just the king, so you'd have to go through it. Litlot et Mordechai ala etz, to reward Mordechai by hanging him on a tree, which obviously is the opposite at this point of what Achashverosh wants. Now here's Achashverosh wants to reward Mordechai. So it's really interesting, because now we have, according to this, the dynamic that the king, if nothing else, has trepidation, is not sure. By the way, there was something else I wanted to share from this book. Is it in this book? Just a moment. Book. It's in a different book. That there were many different things that could have kept Achashverosh up at night. Any thoughts about that? Other than what I gave you some ideas. Any thoughts? About what might have kept him up? Oh, maybe it's in here. Here it is. Jealousy over Haman's invitation to the party. Fear of assassination. An act of God, puzzlement at the second invitation, worry because his queen is upset, which is interesting, or just by chance. Those are all the commentaries say what is keeping him, which I think speaks to how we are all kept up sometimes at night. Like different thoughts go through our own heads when we're kept up at night for something. That's just something I wanted to add there. Okay. So back to what happens next. Na'arei HaMelech, the servants of the king tell him, Hinei Haman omed b'chatzer. Haman is the one who's standing in the courtyard. Vayomer HaMelech yavo. The king says he should come. Vayavo Haman. So now Haman came. So it's so interesting that, again, this midrash is based on the fact, what does the king say? Does the king say, there's a man named Mordechai who I want to honor? No. He says, he's being very obtuse about it. He says, Malasot ba'ish. What should we do for a man? I want to remind everybody, we discussed this in one of our classes, who was referred to as an ish in the Megillah? Anybody remember? 2 people. Ish is a man. Remember the pasuk, Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan Bira? That's one of the pasukim we say out loud. There was a Jewish man in the capital city of Shushan, Ushmo and his name, Mordechai ben Yair ben Kish Ish. Anybody remember that pasuk? It's one of the pasukim we say out loud. So we know that Mordechai is referred to as an Ish. But there's another person who's referred to as an Ish. When Achashverosh is at the second party and says to Esther, who is that person who is plotting to kill you? She says, Ish tsar ve'oyev, a person who is a thorn in our side and an enemy. Haman hara hazeh, this Haman. So Haman and Mordechai are both referred to as an Ish for whatever reason. So it's almost as if that Achashverosh is deliberately leading Haman on to make him think that he's talking about Haman. What should we do for a person, a man, who the king wishes to, how would they say in English? To esteem. Vayomer Haman belibo. So Haman said in his heart. By the way, let's take those 3 words. What did Haman say in his heart? How do you know what people say in their heart? if we think that Mordechai and Esther are the ones who are writing it, that's one of the sources to say that this was written by divine inspiration. Because how could it be that the narrators knew what was in other people's hearts? Everybody with me on that? Okay. Who else would the king want to esteem more than me? So he answers the king, Ish, a man, meaning himself, Asher HaMelech Hafetz Bikoro, who the king wants to honor, to esteem, Yaviu Levush Malchut, they will bring royalty, royal clothes, Asher Lavash Bo HaMelech, which the king wore. And here's the reason, one of the reasons I love this. The sus, what's a sus?
Horse.
So the trup on the sus is a revi'i. This is a revi'i, revi'i, something like that. So the way I sing it is vesus, vesus, because it has the trup that goes down, so I turn it into a nay. That's one of my favorite parts of reading it. And in fact, my granddaughter, who's now 17, who was 4 at the time, when she heard me reading it, she was listening to me, and she said, Safti, Safti, it's a sus, a sus. It was so cute that she got it. So he says, wear the clothing that the king wore. And the sus which the king was riding on, and the keter malchut, the crown on his head, meaning when he was coronated, and put this lavush, this clothing, and the sus, take the same horse, al yad ish, by somebody from the, one of the ministers of the king. What is he missing? What did he say? Clothing, the horse, and the keter malchut, the royal crown. But then when he says what to do with it, he's missing which one? The crown. That's why it helps to have the text in front of you. So here, I'll read it in English. So Haman said to the king, a man who the king is determined to esteem, let them bring royal garb, which the king has worn, a horse on which the king has ridden, and upon whose head a royal crown has been set up. By the way, one of the commentaries said there were pictures of crowns being put on horses. So it could have been that the crown was on the horse. And the garb and the horse being entrusted to someone who was of the king's noble officials. What is he missing? What was he missing from the 3 items? The clothing, the horse, and the crown. But then when he says that they should use it, he only says the clothing and the horse. What is he missing? Why would he be missing the crown? Any thoughts about that? Why does he say, take these 3 things, but he says, and then they should use 2 of them? Any thoughts about that?
Does the keter kind of symbolize Hashem HaMelech?
Well, yes, but why would Haman care about that?
Maybe it's a lesson to us that the Hamelech, the real Hamelech, wasn't in this whole plan.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
According to Haman's way.
Okay, thank you. Ruby, you were going to say something else?
The crown represents leader.
Crown represents leader. So that you should know that the Medrash says that when Haman said the clothing, fine, the horse, fine, but when he said the crown, that Achashverosh's face turned red. Because that to him signified Haman is trying with Esther, right? That's what he had been thinking, to grab my spot. And that makes so much sense. Again, it's always a midrash, but the midrash is based on the text. I mean, if we were just going to read the text, it would just be the text. It's more interesting to add midrash. There's so much more to say. One second, I'm going to finish it soon, and we will continue next week. But it then, let me just look if and when the king answers, what does the king say? And the king says to Haman, Maher, quickly, which we're also going to talk about, take the levush, the garb, ve'et hasus, and the horse. So we see what happens here, that these little tidbits that we're kind of teasing out of the text is showing us what might have been going on in Achashverosh's mind. I actually have a quote here, which I didn't get to yet, which is that this is like the most anti-Semitic. Oh, we'll get to that next time. I won't have time to explain it today. That there's the most but again, according to a medrash, the anti-Semitic line in the whole Megillah is hidden behind one of the psukim, one of the verses. So I'm going to share that next time. So we see that the crown was dropped because Achashverosh thought, and Haman is like really carefully looking at Achashverosh's face once he realized he has to do this to Mordechai. Now, this is his arch enemy. One of the commentaries actually said, how could it be that Haman was willing to do it? One of the commentators said, why didn't he kill himself? So I thought that was a bit much. But that's the question you have, why he didn't kill himself? That was a little weird. But why didn't he protest? But he couldn't. He was like in a subservient place. And the king is telling him, you got to do this. What happens when you don't listen to the king in those times in Persia? Thank you. Oh, nice one, Carol. Both we did it at the same time, right? Off with his head. Off with that was funny. I don't know if somebody else that I noticed Carol doing it. We did this at the same time. So we're going to go into that. Like what we did now was unpack and discuss, according to the Medrash, Achashverosh's psyche, what he's worried about. It's really taking this perek, which I always loved because it's, I don't know, I guess, again, because of the Sus and because it was the first one I read, but it really delved into it so much deeper. And the next Medrash, which we'll learn next time, will be about Haman's psyche and what's going on in his head as the tables are getting turned. That was a lot of talking. I know usually people have more to say. I don't know. Maybe we're just getting back into Megillat Esther. I know I told you, but I found that Medrash, I just couldn't resist it. It just took the text so beautifully. I love quoting a Midrash that you can see where, there are other Midrashim that didn't use the text as clearly. But to me, this made so much sense. You know, the wording of the text, the fact that he asked for the Chronicles, the fact that the Narei HaMelech, what is a Na'ar, is a youth. These are the youths of the king, but they were the youths in plural. So if they were the youths in plural, they weren't the ones reading it. I always thought they were reading it. It made more sense that there's a scribe now, whether he erased it and then the angel came and rewrote it. Obviously, that's a medrash. I get that. But, that's what we're here for, is to learn different ways of understanding it. Thank you. So we went back to the King's Palace. Say goodbye to Ruby and Ellen. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm glad I had this opportunity.